Thank you for joining our fifth episode of ETFs Unwrapped, a guide for asset managers, CEOs, and operational leaders looking at launching ETFs in Europe. I am Daniel Gonzalez Fuster, Head of ETF Solutions, EMEA at BNP Paribas Securities Services Business, and I'm really happy to be joined today by Sabrina Principi, Global Head of Business Development, ETF and Index Solutions at BNP Paribas Asset Management. Today, we will try to give asset management firms a practical view on how to launch or expand their ETF programs in Europe. Sabrina, thanks a lot for joining. And could you please share with us how you first got involved with ETFs?
First of all, thank you very much, Daniel, for the invitation and for the opportunity to share BNP Paribas Asset Management's expertise in ETFs. Well, going back to your question, my journey with ETFs began several years ago, even before I joined BNP Paribas Asset Management. At the time, I was working for one of the most prominent index providers. I had daily interactions with asset managers looking to launch ETFs on our benchmarks and needed information on methodology, replicability, and liquidity on underlying assets. I then joined BNP Paribas in 2017 when the firm made a strategic decision to refocus on the ETF business. At the time, we were managing less than 13 billion euros in ETF and index assets. Today, we manage more than 60 billion. This growth reflects both a strong client demand and our long-term commitment to the business. We're very ambitious for the future. ETF represents one of our key 2030 initiatives with the objective of expanding our ETF offering and strengthening our position as a leading European ETF provider. Our goal is to gather 100 billion new assets by 2030.
Thank you, Sabrina. And you're a global head of business development, so we would love to hear your take. In 2026, what are the biggest trends shaping the European ETF market?
Well, Daniel, I would mention three trends in particular. First, ETFs are becoming one of the privileged investment vehicles of choice for all investors. I think the numbers speak for themselves. ETFs inflows surged to 325 billion in Europe in 2025, and the first quarter of 2026 has been very strong, with net inflows over 106 billion euros. What stands out is the pace of acceleration. In Europe, it took nearly 20 years to reach the first trillion and less than 6 years to grow from 1 to almost 3. I have been working in this financial market industry for quite some time, Daniel, and I cannot recall any other investment solution that has achieved such a level of success. Then there is also another fundamental trend that we need to stress. Traditionally, ETFs were the domain of professional investors. Now, more and more retail investors, platforms, and saving plans are taking part. All types of investors are driving the market's growth. In Germany, for example, ETF saving plans have seen a notable rise in popularity among private investors in recent years. A recent survey found that 51% of adults were interested in such plans, with 18 to 34 years old accounting for 2/3 of that percentage. Online platforms, robo-advisors, and online brokers and investment apps are driving growth. Many retail investors use digital platforms for research to invest. They value the fact that platforms have made investing easier. Fees are often lower than those charged by traditional financial institutions. Their interfaces can facilitate search, selection, and purchases, and these applications are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Besides, these platforms often provide educational resources and market analysis to help investors to make informed decisions.
So we do see an impressive increase in demand for ETFs. What about the offer side?
Well, actually, the second big trend is on the active ETFs that actually are reshaping the competitive landscape. The market for passive ETFs are become overcrowded, leading players to expand into active ETFs. Active ETFs are run by a manager who actively selects securities and makes portfolio decisions to improve returns. As a result, they can outperform rather than match the market index, and they can adjust the portfolio to mitigate potential losses. This does come at a price, of course. Active ETFs are generally more expensive than passive ETFs, with higher management charges and operating costs. I believe the 2025 success will continue. Last year, over 130 new active ETFs were launched by a growing number of asset managers. It's interesting to note that 9 asset managers entered the market in 2024 in Europe via the launch of active ETFs, 12 in 2025 and 3 so far this year.
Thank you, Sabrina. And entering a new market for an asset manager, it's not an easy task, especially when ETFs have a very specific operational setup. How can they do?
Indeed, Daniel, this is the third trend. We see also a new demand for white labels ETFs. White label ETFs are gaining traction, particularly in the discretionary portfolio management, but also among asset managers and financial institutions. These ETFs are created and managed by a third-party provider, but branded and distributed by another company, typically a wealth manager or other financial institution. The third-party provider manages, operates, and administrates the ETF, while the distributor markets and sells the products. By partnering with the third-party providers, distributors can avoid the cost of creating and managing their own ETFs and focus on their core business. Tapping into the expertise and resources of a third-party provider can also enhance the overall quality of the ETF and provide distributor with a competitive edge in the market. While labeling allows for ETFs to be customized to meet the needs for the distributors and their clients, they can easily adapt to changing market conditions and investors' demands. According to a recent survey, Daniel, 40% of wealth managers and asset managers are considering launching their own white label ETFs in the next 2 years. I think that this number is quite strong, driven by the desire for cost-efficient and tailor-made investment solutions.
Oh, thank you, Sabrina. Very interesting. And let's focus now on asset managers' pain points. If an asset manager wants to build an ETF from scratch in Europe, what do you think are the first operational milestones a CEO needs to map out?
Well, there is a common perception that ETFs are simple products to design, launch, and manage. However, the underlying product's infrastructure is quite complex and sophisticated. It requires a wide range of expertise and operational capabilities. First, it's important to stress that ETFs are exchange-traded products with specific regulatory requirements and dedicated operational setup. It must comply with standard obligations applicable to traditional mutual funds and must be listed on an exchange. ETFs fully rely on a dedicated ecosystem that includes exchanges, market makers, and authorized participants. So managing ETFs is operationally demanding. In particular, there are daily creation and redemptions processes, liquidity management, and the high level of transparency required on portfolio holdings. As you know, the devil is in the details, and the ETF business involves many technical and operational nuances. For these reasons, building ETF capabilities in-house or deciding to outsource them fully or partially is a strategic decision. It requires careful consideration.
Thank you. And you mentioned white label ETFs as a big trend in European markets. Could we try to deep dive on white labeling? How you at BNP Paribas Asset Management concretely support European asset managers?
Well, we support European asset managers partners throughout the entire life cycle of a white label ETF project, from the initial feasibility assessment to launch and day-to-day operation. The objective is to allow our partners to access the ETF market efficiently while leveraging our industrial ETF platform and execution capabilities. We work closely with the asset managers to translate an existing strategy, whether index-based or active, into an ETF-compatible structure. We integrate their specific investment rules, constraints, or exclusion list directly into our portfolio management and control framework. This ensures that the ETF fully reflects the client's strategy while benefiting from our daily controls such as NAV validation, track error monitoring, and risk management processes. At BNP Paribas Asset Management, we can provide a full ETF operating model, including the setup for the production and dissemination of portfolio composition files and INAVs, and the coordination with exchanges, authorized participants, and market makers. We work very well with our service partners, such as you, the security service business. Recently, we worked together to support and collaborate with one of the leading pan-European banks that decided to enter the ETF space and appointed us as delegated manager.
Thanks a lot, Sabrina. Thanks for sharing these elements, which I think are very interesting and do show how you can support new players entering into the European ETF market. And now, maybe trying to look ahead, how do you picture this European ETF market by 2030?
Well, forecasts for the European ETF market are very positive. We believe we are entering in a phase of more radical transformation. The shift will be driven by digitalization and increasing retail adoption. We believe that online platforms, robo-advisors, online brokers, and investment hubs will drive the growth, with many retail investors using digital platforms for research and to invest. The wealth and retail segments, in general, will pilot the segment. The online platform business is highly competitive. I guess that platforms will play an increasingly important role in shaping the industry. Regarding the products themselves, we see a growing product sophistication, particularly with the expansion of active ETF strategies, confirming the preference for ETF as the investment wrapper of choice. In Europe specifically, active ETFs are still smaller than in the US, but adoption has accelerated, and we expect to see a similar trend.
Excellent. Many thanks, Sabrina. This was very insightful. It was very good to have you with us. And what we have heard today is that the full story of ETFs is still being written. It's obvious that the European ETF arena will look dramatically different in the next decade. Let me thank also all our listeners, and I do hope you have enjoyed this 5th episode of ETFs Unwrapped.
Thank you, million, Daniel, for the invitation.
Thanks to you.
The information contained within this recording is believed to be reliable, but BNP Paribas does not warrant its completeness or accuracy. Opinions and estimates contained herein constitute BNP Paribas' judgment and are subject to change without notice. BNP Paribas and its subsidiaries shall not be liable for any errors, omissions, or opinions contained within this recording. This material is not intended as an offer or solicitation for the purchase or sale of any financial instrument. For the avoidance of doubt, any information contained within this document will not form an agreement between parties. Additional information is available on request.
This presentation includes a discussion on current market events and is not intended as investment advice or an offer of products or services by BNP Paribas Asset Management. Please keep in mind that the information and analysis in this presentation is only current as of the publication date.